Cullen live in 1 minute. Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live at pghcitypaper.com. Email your questions and comments to Lynn at pghcitypaper.com.
Hello, and welcome to Martin Luther King Day, January 21, also Inauguration Day, the second inauguration of Barack Obama as President of the United States. So a pretty auspicious day all the way around. Somebody tweeted, wow, Barack Obama takes the oath for the second time on Martin Luther King Day, and mass suicides among KKKers reported. I don't know. Pretty amazing, huh? One would love to have Dr. King witness such an inauguration. But this is not to be. I was talking to my son yesterday, and he assumed I had the day off. And I said, no, people don't have the day off on Martin Luther King Day. And he said, what? He was shocked because his experience in life is of a student. And every school he's ever attended, including his current university, they shut down on Martin Luther King Day. He thought it was a very special holiday. And then he said something about, well, are stores open? I said, for heaven's sakes, yeah, they even have like sales. He said, sales? On Martin Luther King Day? You could tell he grew up with this holiday. And I had not realized what import he puts into this day. And I was actually thrilled to see that, because maybe as some of us older ones, again, die off, this day might get treated with a little more respect. I don't know. I said, well, Americans celebrate every holiday as an opportunity to go shopping. That's what Americans do on holidays. I said, every culture has its own thing. I said, Jews eat. That's what holidays mean, you eat. And in the United States, holidays mean you spend money, I guess. He thought it was disrespectful and ridiculous, given what Dr. King was about, and I'm sure he's right. But there it is. There's something wonderful, though, today about the nation's first African-American president being sworn into his second term, and coinciding with Dr. King's day. Did you see the pictures of the Chief Justice giving the oath of office to the president yesterday at the White House? I don't think you could stand farther away. These two men, they do not like each other. And how uncomfortable it must be. I mean, they actively do not like each other. And so the Chief Justice has to come to the White House, and he's probably muttering, and then I'm sure everybody comports themselves with civility and false good humor. But I looked at that picture and I thought, oh, yeah, I could just feel the discomfort in some respects. Maybe more so on the Chief Justice's part than on the President's part. I don't know. And they'll do it all over again today for the rest of us. So, for some reason, I feel sort of cut off from this inauguration day. I mean, I certainly 4 years ago I was not, because it was so historic. It seems less historic now. Although I'm hoping that the president rekindles his capacity to deliver a soaring, inspirational address. One of the reasons that we were taken by him was his oratorical skill. I mean, that's how he was introduced to us, by keynoting the Democratic Convention. And we were collectively blown away by this young man. And he blew us away on more than one occasion. But he doesn't blow you away with these speeches anymore, does he? It's been a long time for me. So, although actually a speech after Newtown I thought was pretty powerful stuff. Anyway, I was disappointed in his first inaugural address, and I really hope he somehow finds that voice that he has inside himself. Some people, observers, pundits, amateur psychologists, are suggesting that he's worn out in some ways. He's sadder and wiser after 4 years, and he's not as inclined to deliver this soaring rhetoric because he now is part and parcel of the muck of Washington politics, and I guess it's harder to keep your sense of possibilities alive. And when you're, dealing with Mitch McConnell and all the rest of them, I don't know. So I hope it's a great speech. I need a great speech. I do. I really do. I hope the president is up to it. Hey, in a few minutes, we're going to talk about preppers. Those are the folks that are prepping for the end times, or not, if not the end times, the difficult times, the scary times, the times when the grid goes down and everyone's sort of stuck fending for themselves. These are people who, in fact, think that day could come soon, for whatever reason, terrorist attack, some global catastrophe, who knows what. And so they stockpile all the things that they would need to keep themselves and their families alive. And, a lot of them seem a little crazed, to say the least. But on the other hand, when you look at what they're doing, it's hard not to believe that maybe they are the what is the Aesop thing? They are the what? I cannot believe it. Who frittered away? And the ant, the hare, no, that's oh, forget it. You know what? I got to tell you something. I am getting old. I am getting too old, maybe, to do this. If I can't think of the simplest things like that, like the industrious ant and the grasshopper. Jess is saying, I don't know what the hell you're doing. What? You don't know the one about the butterfly and the stink bug? No? Oh, Okay, never mind. Never you mind. But it could be that these preppers are actually, they'll be the last one standing, and they'll have blown, they like guns too, so they'll have blown anybody else away who's trying to get to their food, their shelter, whatever. But Bill O'Driscoll's going to be coming in a bit to talk about the fact that these people exist amongst us. And there are really two different kinds. And one kind sort of hails to the, right of the political sphere, and the other to the left. And so there are preppers and there are preppers, and they have a lot in common, but they obviously diverge in some pretty important ways, given that they find themselves on opposite ends of our political spectrum. And it's mostly a result of the more right-wing preppers being people who are individualistic in their approach. It's every man for himself. And the lefty preppers are more community-oriented, so they're not doing this on their own. They're creating sort of lefty communities that would help each other survive if, in fact, survival becomes something that is not as easy as it is right now. I don't know. I didn't know. There's hundreds of people like this in Pittsburgh. And we'll talk about that. And some of what they talk about makes perfect sense to me, actually. But I'm not going to do it anytime soon. That's true, too. Okay, so help me here. What? I have a call? Hello?
Hello.
Yeah. Hi.
Hey, Lynn, this comes into what you're talking about, the water supply. Did you ever read this article where they're taking our water and they're traveling in these giant bladders across the ocean and selling it to China, these big corporations, and they're sucking the Great Lakes down and all the precious water in the United States, and they're taking it overseas?
Who is?
These big corporations, T.B. Boone Pickens and some of those other people.
Wait a minute. That's our water.
Some of this.
You mean, do they have to pay for the water? Who owns that water?
In some cases, they don't even pay for it. I don't know how to get around it, but it's politics and all that.
I don't know about this, and I'd sure like to know about this.
And they're actually draining all the good water into different springs and different things like that, and they're leaving us with all the toilet water. And that's why our water supply it's bad in the cities and different things. But they, this is not even talking about the fracking thing. This is
no. I understand.
The water resources going overseas and that.
Hey, if somebody knows a good article about what you're talking about, send it to me. Because I recall my brother once, I wasn't really listening to this, but we were in Chicago recently and looking at the glorious Lake Michigan. I mean, that is just a huge freshwater lake, one of the largest in the world.
Right.
And he was saying, enjoy it because he was saying it was going to be gone.
Well, the water levels are down on it.
I know they are. Oh, gee, but I didn't know. What do you mean? Corporations are taking the Great Lakes and selling them to China?
That's what I read. I'll have to find that article. This has been a few months back that I read this.
Okay. I would like to... Thank you.
We'll see you.
Bye. Is that true? You understand, I don't know if that's true, and he didn't have but is that true? Somebody help us here. Chris writes, I find it ironic and a bit funny that on Saturday, Gun Appreciation Day, that at 3 separate gun shows, people were injured by guns going off unexpectedly in the shows. And Chris says, you know how responsible these people all are. It wouldn't possibly still be loaded, so why bother checking, right? And these are the people that are going to save us if something happens in a crowded mall or theater or school. They're trained. Wow. What have we become? I thought Gun Appreciation Day was technically on Thursday, but then it seemed like it was being celebrated all throughout the weekend. So there you have it. I have a question. So in the real estate section on Sunday or something, they say they always put a house that's for sale, and they feature it, and they tell you all about it, and then they tell you what the taxes are on it, and blah, blah, blah. It's in the real estate section. Okay, I have a question, because there was a house there on Sunday in Penn Township. It is assessed at $38,000. It is assessed at $38,000. The asking price is $725,000. It's got a private lake. It's got different properties. It's a big, huge house. It used to be owned by the founder of Tillotson Financial, Heffron Tillotson Financial people. What is the point of an assessed valuation if it's not in any manner a realistic portrayal of a property's value? If, in fact, a property is going to sell for $750,000, how and why is it assessed at $38,000? I mean, somebody help me here, because I've seen this kind of thing a million times. This one really jumped out at me. And this is in Butler County, Penn Township. So I know I'm throwing out a lot of questions today, but that's another question I have. What's with that? The assessed valuation having really next to nothing to do with the actual value on the market of a property. Okay? That's something else I want to know. And I hate to tell you this one. Perhaps you saw it. So we supposedly avoided the fiscal cliff, right? And now those sweet Republicans are actually saying that they might, they might keep us from having to deal with another crisis for 3 months. But just 2 weeks after a major pharmaceutical firm, Amgen, pleaded guilty in a federal fraud case, major federal fraud case, they got such a gift from the Congress of the United States. You cannot imagine. Because, they're a corporation and, well, they have special friends in Congress that you and I do not. Apparently, unnoticed in the law that was passed just that was like last week, right? The language buried in Section 632 delays a set of Medicare price restraints on a class of drugs that, lo and behold, Amgen manufactures for kidney dialysis patients. And this has nothing to do with what the fiscal cliff bill was about, right? But what it does is it will cost, this little thing they stuck in there is going to cost us, the taxpayers, up to $500 million while giving this crook of a corporation an incredible windfall. And then you look at, who does Amgen give money to? Oh, surprise! It gives money to the leaders of the Senate Finance Committee, Mitch McConnell, Orrin Hatch. They have both been on the receiving end. And somebody, and there's a Democrat whose name I cannot think of, and they slide this kind of crap in all the time. And this is so we, the people, will be paying a ton more for this drug for 2 more years, while these corporate crooks get this special little kiss from the Senate Finance Committee. Our government is corrupt. I just wanted to say that. Our government is corrupt. And it was just another little indication of that I happened to read over the weekend that, made me unhappy. All right. Well, I'll tell you what. I'm going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about, all those people who are busy getting ready, as opposed to you, who are sitting around thinking everything's always going to be right where you want it, like the electricity and food and all of that. There are people amongst us who aren't so sure that we should be so certain of that. And so they are preparing for dire times. Preppers when we come back.
Email your questions and comments to Lynn at pghcitypaper.com or call Lynn at 412-316-3381. Lynn Cullen Live will return in a moment.
Lynn Cullen Live and Panera Bread celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King.
With the news of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s death, rioting broke out across the nation. King's slaying stunned the nation as no event had since the assassination of JFK. For many blacks, his murder was a judgment upon his nonviolent philosophy. There could have been no crueler memorial than the violence done in his name. Before it was over, 39 people died, and countless numbers were injured in civil disorder that struck more than 130 American cities.
Countdown to King, brought to you by Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield. Have a greater hand in your health, and Lynn Cullen Live.
Go to bergbargains.com for great deals on meals from your favorite local restaurants, museums, and shows. This week only, get discounts up to 20% on gift cards to P.F. Chang's. Supplies are limited. bergbargains.com, Pittsburgh's best bargains. bergbargains.com.
Today, My Care Navigator forwarded my medical records and freed my mind for other things.
Introducing My Care Navigator, your 24/7 healthcare co-pilot, new from Highmark.
My Care Navigator found me the ideal specialist. Less work for me.
My Care Navigator makes it easier to navigate the system. Call 1-888-BLUE-428 to connect with yours today. Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield is an independent licensee of the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association.
Now, it's back to Lynn Cullen Live at pghcitypaper.com.
No. Okay, here, we're back. Miscommunication all over the place. Guess what? Bill O'Driscoll's here, and he knows about ants and grasshoppers.
Arthropods. Insects.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what they are.
Are they?
Exoskeletons, yeah.
Oh, so
but we're not really talking about
No, but I was
entomology.
trying to remember that because, there was it's an Aesop fable?
Yeah.
Were they
I
ants and
think
the grasshoppers?
So. One ant, one grasshopper.
One ant,
Keep it simple.
Okay, there's an ant, there's a grasshopper. The ant is being a very industrious ant. He's preparing for the winter. He's doing his thing. The grasshopper's out, you're saying fiddling? Yes.
As they singing in the fields,
Yeah, singing, having a good
like
time. And then winter comes, and guess what? The grasshopper's starving, freezing, blah, 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 and goes knocking, I guess, on the ant's door for help. Do you remember if the ant gives him help?
I think he kind of says, "You're out of luck, bud. I got enough for me,
and mine,
and
not for you." And you fiddled away your time, and
exactly, yeah.
That's what I thought. So, okay, it seems to me that that's a fitting intro to this the preppers movement. Which you're saying most people maybe have heard about because the National Geographic Channel actually has a show.
There's a reality TV series, and now in its second season on the National Geographic Channel called Doomsday Preppers.
Yeah.
Which is about these folks who are apparently quite numerous who believe that that disasters are likely or imminent. Everything from natural disasters of the sort we already see frequently, right? Katrina, Superstorm Sandy,
sure.
Stuff like that happens all the time, up to things like giant power grid.
Like a terrorist attack
outages.
that totally paralyzes the country because they attacked the computers of the government.
Terrorist attack,
the whole grid goes, everything goes.
Yeah, or
planes, trains,
complete societal breakdowns.
Right.
Where there's widespread rioting in the streets and things like that. And they're saying these guys believe, that kind of stuff is likely enough to happen that we should get ready for it. We should stockpile food, water, medicine, guns, ammo, and a lot of this is going to sound to people like there's a term survivalist, that we remember from way back in the day. These were usually folks who lived in rural areas, who had like their compounds, and things like that. I think what might be a little bit different about preppers is they often live in urban areas. The two folks I interviewed last week both live in the city of Pittsburgh, but they have these compounds or some kind of place to go to. Like if things get really bad, they can quote unquote bug out is the term they use. They have a bug out kit or bag that they're ready to take on a moment's notice and escape to, Venango County or wherever.
But they do. So these urban preppers do have a place that they have.
Many of them do. That's kind of standard practice. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's where they're going to hole up. Why? And they want to escape to the country because they worry that there's too many people in an urban area who would.
Well, they're basically worried that the rest of us are going to be grasshoppers.
That's right, and we're
going to be unprepared. We're going to want their stuff and might want to take it from them by force. Hence the guns. Hence the remote location, undisclosed location, to go to in the event of such an emergency.
Okay, so one of the people this is an article in the current issue of Pittsburgh City Paper. So one of the people who is a prepper who actually was profiled on that National Geographic show, right?
Yes.
Lives in Squirrel Hill?
Yep.
And in fact ran for city council in
his district. Right, yeah.
Squirrel Hill, Josh Wander, his name is. And he's a prepper.
Yes.
And and
he's quite out about it too, which is somewhat unusual. I mean, most of these guys, are they don't necessarily want to talk about it, because.
Well, why would you? Because if you're doing that, you don't want to advertise. I'm the guy who's got the food and the medicine and stuff.
And what Josh says is he's open about it because he wants everybody to be as prepared as he is, basically. He believes he's sort of building a community of preparedness by letting other people know, hey, these are real risks. You should get ready for them too. He doesn't want to be the only guy on his block who's prepared, is another way of looking at it, because then people would be coming to him for help that he might not be able to provide. So it's kind of an interesting take on it for someone who is that outspoken about it.
And he also has a TV show, local?
On PCTV, the local public cable access channel.
Who watches that stuff?
I'm not sure. I used to have a show on PCTV.
You did?
Well, it was local filmmakers. We would spotlight local filmmakers.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Like this was years ago. No, it's fine. I mean, I don't know how many people watch it. They don't have, at least at the time, I don't know that they had a good way of tracking their viewership. But I'm sure it's not high viewership, but
there's still a way to reach people.
Sure.
Okay, so these preppers come across generally as a little odd to me. But I always do end up wondering if, in fact, they are the ants and I'm the grasshopper. And they do, you would be stupid to think that we are not vulnerable as a nation to a kind of cataclysm that would be, I think, nightmarish enough for us not to even get our heads around, sitting in the comfort we're now knowing, right? Well, because all you need is the whole electrical grid to go down and everything stops. Everything stops.
Or for it to go down just in your area. Again, the Sandy folks out on the East Coast, some of them, I think some of them still don't have.
No, I think that's true.
Power, and that's months now. So, we're not especially here in Pittsburgh. We're not especially vulnerable to that kind of stuff. But
I don't know.
Things could happen.
Okay, we have a caller. Hello.
Yes, hello. I'd like to speak with Lynn and her guest, please.
This is you are. This is Lynn.
Oh, Lynn. Good morning.
Hi.
Hey, Lynn. I'm glad you have your guest on because I believe it was last week we had a bioterrorism expert here in Pittsburgh who was talking about exactly what your guest is speaking about the grid, how bioterrorism is probably a bigger threat than the false flag of Al-Qaeda. So
I'm sure.
your guest has any information on that, I think our listening audience would enjoy hearing that.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well, I don't know if what? Do you know who he's talking about?
I don't know who he's talking about. I'm not too up on that stuff. But bioterrorism obviously is, people. This is maybe a great example of that. One way to wage a terror attack would be to say poison the water supply.
Right.
Okay, somebody gets into the Water and Sewer Authority, so now nobody has drinkable water in their house. Right. Then who looks dumb? The people who stored up, couple hundred gallons of water, or the people who didn't worry about it. That's just one example. Obviously, there's you could also poison the river, which is where you don't even have to get into the plan, I guess, right?
I think these things sound so relatively easy to do, actually.
Why haven't they been done?
Yeah, why haven't they been done? And I know I have read pieces about how unbelievably unprotected a lot of this basic stuff is in our country. So we may be whistling past the graveyard, in fact. So these preppers are starting to look like geniuses. However, you say there's a whole other movement called the transition?
Yeah, I've written about them before, the transition town movement. And it's not exactly analogous to preppers, but I think that the difference between them is instructive, too. So the transition town movement began in England about 8 or 9 years ago. There was sort of an activist kind of guy who said, look, as a society, we're facing two big problems. One is climate change, which is going to change the way we grow our food. It's going to change the availability of fresh water and all these other things. And we're also facing peak oil, which is, eventually, oil is a finite resource. We're totally dependent on it in a way that most people don't recognize. And it's going to become more expensive. So we have to prepare as a society, as a community, decide how we're going to confront these things to prosper in the future.
Okay, so their impetus is looking at the future and seeing these potential environmental cataclysms in a way. The fossil fuels not being readily available, oil not being available, and climate change causing havoc in agriculture and water availability.
Just making life less stable.
Okay, but that's not what the preppers we were talking about earlier are concerned about. They're concerned, it seems to me, with mostly...
Yes and no. When you go onto their online forums and so forth, they're mostly talking about kind of cataclysmic events, whether natural disasters, terrorist attacks, things like that. But they do say, I asked Josh Wander about this, and he said, we prepare for any possible scenario. So, the oil runs out, we have a plan for how to deal with that. We have a plan for any of these particular things. I think what's different about them, though, if I could anticipate your next question, is that the transition town people say, look, we want a future without oil because burning fossil fuels is what's causing all these environmental problems like climate change. And such a future, if we plan for it, might actually be better than what we have now. Life would be more local. It would be cleaner. We would be more in harmony with the environment. We would live more locally, so we'd have stronger communities.
So are these transitional people stockpiling stuff? What are they doing?
No, they do things like, again, in England is where this is most advanced. There's whole towns that have kind of gotten organized around this, growing their own food, like returning to the community garden sort of ethic of Britain during World War II, when a lot more food was grown locally, setting up tool sharing, setting up resource sharing, sharing their knowledge and their resources with each other as a community, and making a plan for how we're going to live in the future when things have to be more local and we can't rely on resources shipped in from halfway around the world anymore.
Yeah, well, that just sounds like a smart way to live in general.
That's what they would say. They would say it's actually probably preferable to how we live now in this kind of, very energy-intensive lifestyle.
So, how do these two groups feel about each other?
Well, I talked to one guy who was instrumental in starting Pittsburgh's version of the transition movement, which is there's a bunch of people who are interested in that concept. It hasn't gotten very far here yet in terms of actually doing a lot of stuff. They mostly just meet and kind of talk about, how we might begin to do this. His name was Mark Dixon. He's a local environmental activist, and he thinks preppers are interesting. He doesn't know any preppers, but he thinks there might be some common ground there where we could say, hey, you guys are interested in learning, like, reskilling, they call it. Like, how do you sharpen knives? How do you, generate energy if the grid goes down? All these other things. Maybe we can share resources. Maybe we can learn from each other.
So the transition people, both groups are striving for some kind of sort of self-sustaining structure, so that they won't need all the stuff that we rely on being trucked to us or available to us that other people are giving us. But it seems to me that the transition people are doing it as a community, and these preppers are doing it as individuals. Is that the big difference?
Yeah, I think that's one big difference. I think the idea of transition is that as a community we're stronger. In other words, they don't have secret plans to leave if things don't go well. As individuals, they're like, this is where we're in it together. We're all in it together. We're gonna make this happen as a community.
And the others are more like, it's every man for himself.
To some extent, again, I think Josh Wander is sincere when he says he wants other people to have the same level of emergency preparedness he does. But at the same time, he's also prepared if things get too hairy to bug out and just head out and leave other folks on their own.
And is he prepared to, once he bugs out, to shoot anybody who's coming to get his...
Well, as featured on the National Geographic show, which Josh says sort of somewhat misrepresented him, but was, in terms of sensationalizing things, but was largely accurate. He's heavily armed. he has a lot of guns, and most preppers are a gun. They like their guns, and whereas transition people, you never really hear about. I have to defend my house from all my neighbors because their neighbors are what's defending their house.
That's right.
Is helping them out.
Well, there's certainly, to my mind, something rather wonderfully compelling about the transition idea, and something very off-putting to me about the preppers.
And a lot of this does tend to break down, I think, broadly along sort of political lines. Preppers tend to be political conservatives or libertarians, whereas transition folks are kind of the green lefties. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit of a stereotype. There is probably some some exceptions to that, but that seems to be how it goes. I might also add something else to sort of extend the ant analogy. There's something that's deceptive about that fable, in that ants are not individual creatures.
No, they're communal.
They're colony animals. So I think if you looked at the colony idea, that's a lot closer to what transition is. It's like we're going to prepare as a community, and the community is what's important. The community is what's going to sustain me when stuff starts to go wrong.
That whole idea of, so the communal thing could just be a neighborhood thing. It could just be everybody on my street, we're going to work together. We're going to, right? And it always has made sense to me. I once lived in Madison, Wisconsin, and when I moved into this house, a neighbor came over and said, we like to share tools on this street because it just doesn't make sense for all of us to have a lawnmower, for all of us to have, and I remember standing there in my front door saying, why, that's so brilliant. Why do we all have lawnmowers? We all have these little, what stupidity. So that street had already, back in the 70s, sort of organized. And this was these were substantial homes and stuff, but they were of a political mindset that it made no sense. So they inventoried who had the snow blowers, who had the this, and everybody borrowed from everybody else, and it was a communal tool shed, essentially.
Yeah.
That's so smart.
Although, of course, it depresses the economy. If each person is not buying his own lawnmower.
Well, then...
I implore you, Lynn, think of the economy.
I know that's true, but shouldn't we have an economy that doesn't require that kind of absurdity?
That's crazy talk, Lynn.
Damn. That's something that everybody could do on their street, organized.
Oh, yeah.
We will have a communal snowblower. We will have a communal...
Because most of the time, most of that stuff just sits there.
That's right. I mean, obviously, it requires you to organize and for people to be of goodwill, so if something has to be repaired and all that. So then it can get complicated. But once you're in touch with your neighbors like that, all kinds of wonderful stuff can happen.
A friend of mine grew up in Nebraska and said it was just common practice for people to borrow stuff, like just, come over, just if you need a ladder, take it out of the ladder, just bring it back when you're done, Yeah, so that, it's sort of rebuilding community that we've lost over the years because of a variety of things, people moving around so much, people locked inside their houses watching TV by themselves.
And it's too bad that we have an economy that requires us to buy things we don't need.
Yep.
That's nuts. Yep.
I agree.
Well, you've radicalized me, Bill. I'm in.
I thought you were already there.
No, sort of, but but I don't have the energy to organize any of this stuff. But I am. This is fascinating. So, hey, thank you. If people want to know more, check it out online, right?
Yep, online.
And I thank you.
Sure.
Fascinating stuff. Let's all aspire to being ants, not grasshoppers.
I like it. All right.
Bill O'Driscoll, ladies and gentlemen. I'll take a break. We'll be back.
More is on the way with Lynn Cullen Live.
Pittsburgh City Paper's annual winter guide is available now. Pick up one today for the best wintertime events in Western PA, plus Gin Blossoms, Morrissey, and Chris Webby. Pittsburgh City Paper, available at over 1,700 locations throughout Western Pennsylvania, and on the web at pghcitypaper.com, and on your smartphone at citypapermobile.com.
Packers.
Vikings.
We come from different places.
Uptown. Downtown.
We come to different conclusions.
Half empty.
Half full. But when we live united, we make a real difference in the building blocks of life. Children succeed in school, families gain financial stability, the health of our neighbors improves, and suddenly so do our communities. Real change won't happen without you.
Live united.
So give, advocate, volunteer, live united. Sign up today at liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
Have a question or an opinion? Call Lynn Cullen at 412-316-3381 or email lynn at pghcitypaper.com. Now, more with Lynn Cullen Live.
Okay. I want to thank Ansel for getting back to me about the assessed value stuff nonsense. You look around and the kind of structures that we create are so often so stupid, so absurd. Every home having its own, lawnmower being one of those absurdities, and this assessment thing being an absurdity to me too. And here's what Ansel says: basing a tax on the perceived, literally subjective value of a house has always seemed ridiculous to me. I can ask 10 different assessors to value my house, and I will receive 10 different values. Additionally, the value of a house is not an accurate indicator of what people can afford to pay in real estate taxes. We have millionaires living in very modest homes. It's time, I don't think there's so many millionaires living in modest homes. I think there's more people who can't afford the homes that they're living in. I think that's more of an American thing, frankly. It's time to change our real estate tax system to an income-based tax because assessments will never be accurate. Okay, well, Ansel, you still didn't answer my question about why, if you're doing an assessed valuation system, would you not make the assessed values realistic? That's the part I don't get. Whatever. Chuck is wondering how Mitt Romney's feeling today. What do you think he's doing, or how do you think he's feeling? I'm not gloating, but I have to think that today is a very difficult day for him. Well, sure. Sure. Just as difficult as if you're Tom Brady. Okay. Lynn, apologies to your guest, but I can't believe we're talking about preppers today, a day when your efforts and the efforts of your audience come to fruition in the form of this inauguration. Today we should be using their time to relish in our victory and converge in all things politics, all things presidential. All this talk of preppers, you have me worried. Do you know something I don't know? Oh, Dorothea, do I know something? No, I don't know anything. Well, here's what I'm going to do today, and this is a result of my son. This was his idea. When he heard, I don't want to revel today. I mean, I don't. The reveling 4 years ago made sense to me. Today, I think, again, we've all sobered up. We got so much to deal with, as does the president. I don't know. I just wish him all the best. God, I really do. I don't know why anyone could bear that job. At any rate, it's Martin Luther King Day. And when my son heard that I was working on Martin Luther King Day, which he thought was wrong somehow, he thinks it's a very serious day. And I said, he said, well, if you're working, at least what you should do is read Letter from a Birmingham Jail. And I thought, wow. It's not like he ever talked to me about I didn't even know he said, you should read it. And I said, that's just a wonderful idea. First of all, it's way too long. It is an extraordinarily long letter. Dr. King didn't have a lot to do while he's sitting in that cell, so he wrote a heck of a long letter. It is extraordinary. And I want to thank my son because when I hung up, I went and looked for the letter online and spent time reading it in its entirety. And it's awesome and reminds you of the power of the moral vision of Dr. King. And so I want to share with you just parts of it that I think will work, and my apologies to Dr. King, but it's still going to be long. And if you've never read it, please do. And even if you have read it, but you didn't read it yesterday like I did, it always has power. So this is my way of honoring this day, this extraordinary day, Martin Luther King Day, and the second inaugural day of Barack Obama. He wrote the letter, as you know, to his clergyman in Birmingham who had put out a statement calling his political activities unwise and untimely. And this letter was a response to them. It was written on April 16th, 1963. My dear fellow clergymen, while confined here in the Birmingham City Jail, I came across your recent statement calling my present activities unwise and untimely. Since I feel that you are men of genuine goodwill and that your criticisms are sincerely set forth, I want to try to answer your statement. I am in Birmingham because injustice is here. I am cognizant of the interrelatedness of all communities and states. I cannot sit idly by in Atlanta and not be concerned about what happens in Birmingham. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. Never again can we afford to live with the narrow, provincial, outside agitator idea. Anyone who lives inside the United States can never be considered an outsider anywhere within its bounds. You deplore the demonstrations taking place in Birmingham, but your statement, I am sorry to say, fails to express a similar concern for the conditions that brought about the demonstrations. I am sure that none of you would want to rest content with a superficial kind of social analysis that deals merely with effects and does not grapple with underlying causes. It is unfortunate that demonstrations are taking place in Birmingham, but it is even more unfortunate that the city's white power structure left the Negro community with no alternative. Racial injustice engulfs this community. Birmingham is probably the most thoroughly segregated city in the United States. Its ugly record of brutality is widely known. Negroes have experienced grossly unjust treatments in the courts. There have been more unsolved bombings of Negro homes and churches in Birmingham than in any other city in the nation. These are the hard, brutal facts of the case. On the basis of these conditions, Negro leaders sought to negotiate with the city fathers, but the city fathers consistently refused to engage in good faith negotiation. My friends, I must say to you that we have not made a single gain in civil rights without determined legal and nonviolent pressure. Lamentably, it is an historical fact that privileged groups seldom give up their privileges voluntarily. Individuals may see the moral light and voluntarily give up their unjust posture, but as Reinhold Niebuhr has reminded us, groups tend to be more immoral than individuals. We know through painful experience that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. For years now, I have heard the word wait. It rings in the ear of every Negro with piercing familiarity. This wait has almost always meant never. We must come to see with one of our distinguished jurists that justice too long delayed is justice denied. Perhaps it is easy for those who have never felt the stinging darts of segregation to say, wait. But when you have seen vicious mobs lynch your mothers and fathers at will and drown your sisters and brothers at whim, when you have seen hate-filled policemen curse, kick, and even kill your black brothers and sisters, when you see the vast majority of your 20 million Negro brothers smothering in an airtight cage of poverty in the midst of an affluent society, when you suddenly find your tongue twisted and your speech stammering as you seek to explain to your 6-year-old daughter why she can't go to the public amusement park that has just been advertised on television, and see tears welling up in her eyes when she is told that Funtown is closed to colored children, and see ominous clouds of inferiority beginning to form in her little mental sky, and see her beginning to distort her personality by developing an unconscious bitterness toward white people. When you have to concoct an answer for a 5-year-old son who is asking, Daddy, why do white people treat colored people so mean? When you take a cross-country drive and find it necessary to sleep night after night in the uncomfortable corners of your automobile because no motel will accept you. When you are humiliated day in and day out by nagging signs reading white and colored. When your first name becomes nigger, your middle name becomes boy, however old you are, and your last name becomes John, and your wife and mother are never given the respected title Mrs. When you are harried by day and haunted by night by the fact that you are a Negro living constantly at tiptoe stance, never quite knowing what to expect next, and are plagued with inner fears and outer resentments. When you are forever fighting a degenerating sense of nobodiness, then you will understand why we find it difficult to wait. There comes a time when the cup of endurance runs over, and men are no longer willing to be plunged into the abyss of despair. I must make 2 honest confessions to you, my Christian and Jewish brothers. First, I must confess that over the past few years I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his stride toward freedom is not the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods, who paternalistically believes he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by a mythical concept of time, and who constantly advises the Negro to wait for a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection. We who engage in nonviolent direct action are not the creators of this tension. We merely bring to the surface the tension that is already there. We bring it out in the open where it can be seen and dealt with, like a boil that can never be cured so long as it is covered up, but must be opened with all its ugliness to the natural medicines of air and light. Injustice must be exposed with all the tension its exposure creates to the light of human conscience and the air of national opinion before it can ever be cured. Let me take note of my other major disappointment. I have been so greatly disappointed with the white church and its leadership. I felt that the white ministers, priests, and rabbis of the South would be among our strongest allies. Instead, some have been outright opponents, refusing to understand the freedom movement and misrepresenting its leaders. All too many others have been more cautious than courageous and have remained silent behind the anesthetizing security of their stained glass windows. But again, I am thankful to God that some noble souls from the ranks of organized religion have broken loose from the paralyzing chains of conformity and joined us as active partners in the struggle for freedom. They have gone to jail with us. Some have been dismissed from their churches, have lost the support of their bishops and fellow ministers, but they have acted in the faith that right defeated is stronger than evil triumphant. Even if the church does not come to the aid of justice, I have no despair about the future. I have no fear about the outcome of our struggle in Birmingham, even if our motives are at present misunderstood. We will reach the goal of freedom in Birmingham and all over the nation, because the goal of America is freedom. Abused and scorned though we may be, our destiny is tied up with America's destiny. Before the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth, we were here. Before the pen of Jefferson etched the majestic words of the Declaration of Independence across the pages of history, we were here. For more than 2 centuries, our forebears labored in this country without wages. They made cotton king. They built the homes of their masters while suffering gross injustice and shameful humiliation. And yet, out of a bottomless vitality, they continued to thrive and develop. If the inexpressible cruelties of slavery could not stop us, the opposition we now face will surely fail. We will win our freedom because the sacred heritage of our nation and the eternal will of God are embodied in our echoing demands. Before closing, I feel impelled to mention one other point in your statement that has troubled me profoundly. You warmly commended the Birmingham police force for keeping order and preventing violence. I doubt that you would have so warmly commended the police force if you had seen its dogs sinking their teeth into unarmed, nonviolent people. I doubt that you would so quickly commend the policemen if you were to observe their ugly and inhumane treatment of Negroes here in the city jail. If you were to watch them push and curse old Negro women and young Negro girls, if you were to see them slap and kick old Negro men and young boys, if you were to observe them, as they did on 2 occasions, refuse to give us food because we wanted to sing our grace together, I cannot join you in your praise of the Birmingham police. I wish instead you had commended the Negro demonstrators of Birmingham for their sublime courage, their willingness to suffer, and their amazing discipline in the midst of great provocation. One day, the South will recognize its real heroes. They will be the James Merediths with the noble sense of purpose that enables them to face jeering and hostile mobs, and with the agonizing loneliness that characterizes the life of the pioneer. They will be old, oppressed, battered Negro women, symbolized in a 72-year-old woman in Montgomery who rose up with a sense of dignity and with her people decided not to ride segregated buses, and who responded with ungrammatical profundity to one who inquired about her weariness. My feet is tired, but my soul is at rest. The heroes will be the young high school and college students, the young ministers of the gospel, and a host of their elders, courageously and nonviolently sitting in at lunch counters and willingly going to jail for conscience's sake. One day the South will know that when these disinherited children of God sat down at lunch counters, they were in reality standing up for what is best in the American dream, and for the most sacred values in our Judeo-Christian heritage, thereby bringing our nation back to those great wells of democracy which were dug deep by the Founding Fathers. I hope this letter finds you strong in the faith. I also hope that circumstances will soon make it possible for me to meet each of you, not as an integrationist or a civil rights leader, but as a fellow clergyman and a Christian brother. Let us hope that the dark clouds of racial prejudice will soon pass away, and the deep fog of misunderstanding will be lifted from our fear-drenched communities. And in some not too distant tomorrow, the radiant stars of love and brotherhood will shine over our great nation with all their beauty. Yours for the cause of peace and brotherhood, Martin Luther King, Jr. Thank you for listening to that, and watch the inauguration that Dr. King didn't live to see.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper, Steel City Media, and its advertisers.